Hi, my name is Ryan Hooper, and I'm a history major.
Hi, I'm Rowdy Moore, mechanical engineering major.
Today we'll be discussing the situation in France in 1789 and how they mirrored the situation in Saint-Domingue at the same time, as well as how they are different, explain the situation in Saint-Domingue with France, and how they led to the course of the French and Haitian revolutions. The day is January 21st, 1793. This is the last day our beloved France shall be tainted by a king. From this point forward, our beloved nation shall suffer through a reign of terror, as the streets are filled with a cacophony of guillotines, as traitor brother and nobleman alike shall receive as deserved.
On August 14th, 1791, slaves gather in the woods at Boyac-Quéman to sacrifice a black pig. They are there to swear to kill all the white colonists on their island.
A peasant contemplates recent events upon overthrowing the royal family. We were betrayed by our kinsmen. These wealthy families are blessed with nobility, rank, and position. All they give to France is little more than a birth. While we toiled on our devices under a dream that our people can achieve bourgeois status through hard work and sacrifice. However, reality is not such the case. My family starves, and my rent, she rises. Our food shrivels, while my wages shrink. What am I to do? My nation grows weary and weak, while king and queen glutton themselves on lavishness and fineries. What were we to do? A beggar in Paris gazes upon a party of noblemen arriving in a theater. My house has been seized. Many of us are forced to beg in these streets. The alley wretched in putrid scents. I am unable to find work. No one hires these days. It could always be worse. I hear Haute-Marne has 15% of its population stricken in poverty. But as I rot away from the inside, I witness wealthy noblemen enjoying themselves with growing apathy to their fellow man. I know not why I find myself angry. France was a nation of hierarchical law that was commonplace during the monarchy, with a culture of liberty and meritocracy. This created a paradoxical situation of false dreams and a legal nightmare. In France, people were to stay in their own hierarchies, and one was heavily shunned for even speaking to members outside of their own hierarchy. And the churches where God made every man in his image and perfection. Frenchmen were seated separately in pews based on class. During communion, the rich would eat before the poor, while at the dinner table, the highest member of a society would sit at the head of the table. Even in the cemeteries, where the dead lie, they were separated into class as well. There was not much land to go around either for the common man. For example, the clergy, which consisted of 130,000 members, or 0.5% of the population, owned 10% of the land in France, which was usually the nicest properties in almost every settlement where people could congregate. Together with the nobility and the monarchy, the first two estates, consisting of 1.5% of the population, possessed 28% of all land in France.
The slaves in Haiti work long hours and are beaten, broken, and tortured. There is a Negro Code made by King Henry XIV that should be followed to at least give them some protection from their abusers. But in reality, that is not such the case. Slaves are still abused, mistreated horribly to a point where they rely on poison. They poison their masters. They poison themselves, and then they poison their children. They do it in a desperate attempt to make their torment stop, and their cries of help falls on deaf ears, to a point where they know the only people they can rely to save them is themselves. The Negro Code, which was Louis XIV's attempt to give the slaves of Haiti humane treatment, ordered that they be given every week 2 pots and a half of manioc, 3 cabasas, 2 pounds of salted beef, or 3 pounds of salted fish, which was enough food to last a healthy man for 3 days. However, masters often fell short of this, and would give them usually half a dozen pints of coarse flour, rice, or peas, and half a dozen herrings instead. This was not enough food to keep the slaves going, and slaves would often return to their huts worn out. However, at slaves' huts, they would usually be able to grow their own crops, which could supplement all the food they were missing out. So, if a slave was not working for their masters, they would be working for themselves. They were given 2 hours of every day, and holidays and Sundays, where they would work for themselves. A lot of hardworking slaves cultivated vegetables and raised chickens. They would sell these in towns to buy rum and tobacco, or even if by luck in industry they could buy their buy their freedom. This was often endorsed by masters. But the worst things the slaves on Haiti had to deal with were their abusers. In 1965, the Negro Code authorized whipping. Though the whip should have been a woven cord or just a cane, which is what the code demanded. However, a lot of masters would replace the whip with cowhide, local reeds, which would hurt or maim the slave. The max number of whips that should have been given to any slave should have been 50. However, many masters would go above that and would often kill their slaves by whipping them to death. The mistreatment of slaves does not stop there. Masters would torture their slaves. They would pour salt in their wounds. They would put ash in their wounds. They would even explode their slaves. They would put boiling cane sugar over their heads, burn them alive, roasted them on slow fires, or bury them up to their heads and leave flies to eat at them. For this, many slaves ran away when they could. They ran into the mountains for their own safety. They did whatever they could to get away. They would poison themselves to attempt to stop it all. They would poison their masters in an attempt to also stop it. They poisoned their children so their children could not have to endure what they were going through. And if the master was good, they would even poison the master's crops and animals just to prevent the master from leaving with somebody who would abuse them. The life of a slave on Haiti was hard, broken, and full of abuse. For every good master, there was plenty of bad ones.
Overall, the only real connection between the Haitians and the French would have to be the debt spiraling that France partook in after the American Revolution. The French spent 50% of their budget on debt alone and 6% of the budget on royal spending. And to pick up for that, they required the Haitians to make more work and pay more taxes. And do you remember the amount of sugar that the Haitians had to produce after?
400,000 tons.
And I think it was like 700 tons is what they were producing before. On top of the extra taxes, I think the Grand Blancs got a little upset and decided to break off from France.
Right. And then these situations we have talked about, they ignited the powder keg, which was both revolutions. For example, in Haiti, your Grand Blancs were equivalent to your Bonnet Noblesse. Your Petit Blancs were equivalent to your Nobles de Robe, and your De Cluse Couleur would be equivalent to your Third Escape.
Essentially, it just sounds like they had a giant class warfare breakout between three different factions. And it looks like, the slaves in the gens de couleur were pretty much like the Third Estates.
Right. And then the biggest difference between the two is that the revolutions in Haiti were more about
Freedom.
Race and freedom. The French already had freedom, but
they were starving and neglected compared to an abusive Haitian government.
right. Atrocities committed by both the Haitians and French would be
The Rebellion Factory riot, in which 300 rioters were executed on the scene, which is one of the worst riots quelled in Victorian history.
or the gens de couleur sending slaves back to Africa only for them to end up back in Haiti and to be executed. While both these revolutions took place near the same time and did impact each other, these were both great victories and great losses for the people that had to endure it. This concludes our presentation.